Well, greetings and good morning and Happy New Year, everyone. My name is Ben Moynihan. I'm the Executive Director at the Algebra Project, and I'm thrilled to be here with you all at the beginning of the year of math, and it's my great honor and pleasure to introduce the presenter of the 2026 American Mathematical Society Lecture on Education. And I just want to give a shout out to Dr. Betsy Stovall, who helped us get set up here this morning and organize this session for us. So Betsy, could you just wave your hand to folks? Yes. Thank you, Betsy. Who is mathematics for? What responsibilities do we share in our multiracial, multicultural, and intergenerational democratic republic for ensuring that mathematics education supports opportunity, agency, and belonging for all? Where are the voices of mathematicians, educators, families, and young people in this discussion? Maisha Moses is Executive Director of the Young People's Project, or YPP. And I know we have some YPP people in the house. Can you wave? Yes, yes. All right. Maisha holds a BA in psychology from Harvard College, a Master of Science degree in mathematics from Southern Illinois University, where Greg Budsman was her thesis advisor. Greg, yes. Since 1991, Maisha has supported students and teachers in under-resourced schools and communities nationally. She's been co-principal investigator on National Science Foundation studies, adapted Algebra Project training of trainers' competencies to the development of YPP near-peer math literacy workers, and co-authored articles on the roles of young people in the teaching and learning of mathematics. She is co-chair with Deborah Lowenberg-Ball of the Education Advisory Committee of the Simons-Laufer Mathematical Sciences Institute. And I know Deborah's here too. There she is. Very importantly, she is auntie to the many nieces and nephews of the Moses family, and she continues to mentor generations of YPP math literacy workers who support the math learning of their peers around the country. I first met Maisha in the spring of 1989 in the sunny front room of her parents' home in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I had met Bob and Janet Moses at a civil rights movement history conference at Dartmouth College in April and was visiting their family on a weekend in that May. That evening, we all went out to see Spike Lee's then new film, Do the Right Thing, which explored themes of community, cultural identity, racial animosity, and economic inequality. The movie held up a mirror to the nation. We knew then, as we know now, we have work to do. But who comprises this we? The mathematics education work that Maisha's father, Bob Moses, started in the early 1980s through the Algebra Project offered an alternative to some of the Orwellian realities we experience in the United States. Bob's legacy reminds us that we, the people of the U.S. Constitution's preamble, can collaboratively create and pursue opportunities that give all people in the nation the best chance to live a fulfilling life and to take a meaningful place in contributing to the life of the nation. So I invite us all to actively listen to the ideas and the stories that Maisha shares with us this morning. And while you listen, please consider questions you may have for the advancement of mathematics proficiency, for the year of math, for yourselves, and for our nation, so we can all have a conversation with Maisha following her talk. I know of no one more steadfast and dedicated to the proposition that not only can all children learn and do rigorous mathematics, but that young people also should be encouraged and compensated to teach rigorous mathematics to each other. Please welcome our wonderful friend and colleague, Maisha Maisha Moses.
You're welcome. All right, good morning. Y'all can hear me? All right. Thank you to the AMS for having me. I'm really, really honored to be here to give this talk, and especially to the nominating committee. It was a big surprise. I was not expecting it, and this is my first time to the joint math meetings. So I gave a couple of handouts. One handout talks about the parts of this talk. There's 3 parts. The first part is medium length, the second part a little bit longer, the third part shorter, and then I hope to leave plenty of time for questions and conversation. And then I also shared some information about the Young People's Project and the work that the young people in the Young People's Project do. Many of them are here in the room with us today. And I wanted to share that in their own words. So feel free to use those documents as you like. So I inherited this work. Both of my parents were in the civil rights movement, so like the work in the big sense. My parents actually met in Mississippi. They were both from New York City. My mother tells a story that she thinks that her mother, who was a nurse, helped to deliver my father when he was born at Harlem Hospital. And their paths did not cross until they both ended up in Mississippi, and something deep, deep, deep within them was moved to really commit their lives and put their lives on the line for the struggle for Black freedom in America. And so they worked with SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. They worked together on Freedom Summer. And then afterwards, they hooked up, and they ended up in Tanzania and started a family. I was born in Tanzania. I'm the oldest of 4. My youngest sister was born when we came back. But my mother, I didn't realize until much later, my mother started working on me when I was 3 years old. So her job in the family was to teach us how to read. My father's job was to do math. And my mother had ordered some books, these I Can Read books, Dick and Jane books, and all of the characters in the book were white. And so she proceeded to color all of the characters in the book in brown, with brown skin. And at 3, I can remember thinking that there is something going on in this world that I need to pay attention to. I don't know what it is, but her lesson was indelible. But it was really my dad who I think passed on his work. I ended up following in his footsteps in his math work. And so today I want to tell a little bit of that story. So he started doing math with us in Tanzania, and when we came back to the United States, he continued to do that. When I was in elementary school, we did math every day after school. We did math in the summers. My cousins came to visit, and he made them do math. We went on vacation, and he took the math books. And so by the time I was in 8th grade, he thought I was ready to take algebra. But the school that I was going to didn't offer algebra, and I was really tired of doing math with him at home, and I was making it difficult. So he went around me, and he showed up in my math class one day, and he had made a deal with my math teacher for him to be my algebra teacher because she could not teach algebra. And so that was horrible. 8th grade was really, really rough. But one thing I do remember was my friends were unhappy because they thought it was unfair that I got to take algebra, and they didn't. And my dad was working with 3 of us. There were 3 other students that had been sorted into the highest level math group in the class. And so he was working with the 3 of us, 4 of us. But the rest of my friends thought that that was really unfair. So in any case, that set me up for success. I went on and I did college level math in high school, college prep math in high school. I was the only black student in all of my math and science classes at Cambridge Rindge and Latin School, and in Cambridge, Harvard on one end, MIT on the other end. That was some decades ago. The situation today is pretty much still the same. The work that my dad did with me enabled me to make school math really easy. And so I never memorized any formulas, and I just taught myself the formulas. But that all broke down for me when I hit calculus. None of it made sense. And so I sort of hit a wall there. And I ended up going to Harvard, mostly because it was close to home. My dad thought it would be good for me to be close to home and continue helping the family. By that time, my mother had gone to medical school, so he was really catching it. He was raising us all, and my mom was off doing her thing. And so he thought it would be good if I could stay close to home. And I was a swimmer, and I really liked Harvard's swimming program. So when I went to Harvard, I took math again. I took calculus again freshman year. The teacher taught it, trying to be very rigorous, did a theorem proof treatment of calculus, and I was completely lost. And then senior year, I took it again, and I worked with a wonderful teacher who was trying to think about, how to make calculus meaningful. And in the meantime, I started working with the algebra project. So after I went off, my dad stayed at my elementary school to continue working with students, because what he noticed was that the math classes were racially stratified, economically stratified. He was concerned about my brothers and my sister who were coming along after me. And so he stayed and started working with students, and he was doing a philosophy of math program at Harvard. And the challenges that the students were having to transition from arithmetic to algebra really caught his attention. And so I ended up, after my swimming career ended, I ended up working with the Algebra Project during college, and I spent 2 years in college in the Algebra Project classroom with Lynn Godfrey. She was the first Algebra Project teacher. So I want to describe my experience doing what I call my dad's math, Algebra Project math, in Lynn's classroom. Take a trip on a subway. Write stories and draw pictures about your experiences on the trip. Allow time for students to talk a lot with each other about their experiences, their stories, and pictures. The talk includes conversations about many things: where they went, what they ate, someone losing their chewing gum on an escalator and trying to get it back, personal observations about all sorts of things and all sorts of feelings. Discuss the things their stories and pictures have in common in order to distill 4 universal features of a trip, features that are probably too obvious to pay attention to. Features that probably nobody talked about in their stories or represented in their pictures. Talk about the meaning of those features in relation to the students' experiences. Develop symbolic representations of these features and that then become their own objects of study. Do this again with a sequence of activities. Make-do stories, the winding game, trading post, making lemonade concentrates, activities comparing heights, weights, temperatures, lengths, speeds of people, and objects in motion. Activities involving various kinds of relay races. Develop a culture of allowing every child in the class to have and express an opinion about their experiences. Facilitate idiosyncratic, wide-ranging, deep, shallow, zany, serious classroom discussions. Allow every child to be seen. Allow every child's point of view to matter. Develop a mathematics of paying careful attention to things that are often too obvious to pay attention to in order to distill universal features from these experiences. Develop a culture of having discussions and debates about the meaning of these features, validated by observations. Cultivate a lexicon of feature talk, a way of talking about these features and how they relate to each other, and pay close attention to the structure of feature talk and the different ways its sentences organize meaning and information. Create symbols to tell universal mathematical stories based on the features, the feature talk, and the shared meanings the students develop. Become fluent in the concepts that emerge from these processes, such as start, finish, distance, direction, number of stops, trips, displacements, equivalence, length, compared to, position, relative position, consecutive, followed by, benchmark, opposites, trip lines, integers, integer models. Use all of these concepts to read, interpret, and discuss the meaning of A minus B is equal to A plus the opposite of B. It turns out these were the concepts I needed to understand what a derivative is in calculus, which I was taking again as a senior because I didn't understand it to my satisfaction the first and second times I took it. It turns out I loved this way of doing math and the way of being together that is required for this way of doing math. The deep reflection, their careful attention to language and words and meaning, the activities that are a space for play, movement, and moments of gaiety combined with scientific observation, the respect for each other's opinions, the collegiality, the sense of connection to each other as we all get a chance to share what we think, see, and feel, knowing that our contributions matter for our collective learning. I was hooked, and I told my dad I wanted to continue working with the algebra project after college, and basically, I've been here ever since. So, how to live a life in struggle and neither be a victim nor an executioner. So the picture that you have, there's my dad and Julian Bond, and it's snapshots from an interview. Julian was interviewing my dad. And when they were talking about this topic, you know, they were very serious. But they had moments when they just would look at each other and connect and smile in such a beautiful way. And my experience of being around movement people was that there was such this deep, deep love that they had. They really went through something together, and that love lasted throughout their lives. So it was really a privilege to to grow up around these people. So Julian was interviewing my dad, and he says, Julian, in 1964, in an interview with Robert Penn Warren, you said that Camus' views were central to your own thinking. Bob. Well, Camus had outlined a kind of philosophy that struck me as minimal in the sense that the issue of walking this line, that you had to be engaged, but you did not want to be a victim, but you did not want to cross the line and become an executioner. So how to walk that line was the way I thought about the work that we were doing. How to do that work so I'm not in the role of a victim, but I'm also not trying to cross it and somehow be an executioner. Julian, and was the concept of being an outsider included in this thought? Bob, in terms of Camus' thought, a stranger, the idea of how do you overcome estrangement is there, but it's the estrangement of one person against another, and how do you build a bond in action of actual relation? How does real relation happen in the action which is living? So the idea of living with purpose in communities, in families, but still really living a life in struggle. How do you live that life in struggle and balance it? In some sense, that's what I think has made my own life have some kind of sense to it. It's a life in struggle that I first learned about living such a life through the movement. So when I joined the Algebra Project, I end up in Oakland, and I end up at King Estates Junior High School, and there's a grant that is supporting my work. And there are 3 teachers, really amazing math teachers. They had strong mathematics. And they were doing the Algebra Project. They wanted to do the Algebra Project, but they were struggling. This was a very new way of teaching math, and the school was insane. And I'll tell you a little bit about that. And so they needed help. And so that was my job, was to go out and work in this school and to help them. And when I first landed at King Estates, I thought, oh my God, like, what is going to happen to these children when they grow up? Like, how are they going to grow up? I had never been in a school like that. They trashed the cafeteria every day. They had fights all over the place. They roamed the halls. They got into all kinds of shenanigans in lunch. The school was sort of a little bit in the hills, and they would go out into the hills and do all sorts of things. Like one metaphor for me, they would come to school in the morning and they would have baby bottles with liquor and juice in baby bottles. So trying to teach, trying to have these rich conversations about math was quite a challenge in this environment. So Princess, the hardest working 7th grader in the school, walked out of class and joined a daily river of her classmates walking the hall. I was very surprised to find her there and asked her what was happening. She said she had been in a class, but she couldn't stand it anymore. Between the teacher's ineptitude and her classmates' disruption, she wasn't being educated, so she walked out. In doing so, she refused to be a victim of the non-education happening in her class, but her response made her a victim of the adults' perceptions that she and her classmates didn't care about their education and so weren't really worthy of investment. Nor did her response help her get the education she so desperately wanted and needed. But Princess really helped me because she articulated what I think all the students were trying to say through their actions. But I could hear Princess because she had demonstrated that she was such a serious student. So eventually, the teachers succeeded in doing the algebra project. I was there for about 5 years. They really mastered the art of teaching the algebra project way, and it was beautiful to see. And the school created the structures so that all students completed algebra by the time they left the school. But by then, my grant had run out, and at the end, the sad part was that the teachers decided to give up the algebra project. They made an intentional choice because we could never get the district to support what they were doing, and it was too hard for them to be out of alignment with, the rest of the district. And so in the meantime, I had become a trainer with the algebra project, and I was going around the country working with teachers and supporting teachers. And I got to learn, that the complications, the issues at King Estates it wasn't just King Estates. I saw a lot of the same issues all over the country. But I was also struggling with the fact that there were some teachers who really embraced the algebra project, and then there were, quite a few teachers who, maybe just did so in a surface way. And so one day on a site visit, a teacher confesses to me and Bill, I think I was with Bill, that she isn't really doing the algebra project. She's only doing enough to try to make it look like it's happening when we make our site visits. And she says that she knows the traditional approach does not work and that it doesn't work for her students. But it is the status quo that the system supports. And if the students fail, then she's not going to be held accountable. But if she tries something new, like the algebra project, and the students fail, then maybe she'll lose her job. And even though the principal supported the algebra project, she didn't fully believe that her livelihood wouldn't be at risk. And so that just really broke a little bit of my heart. Because I love teaching. I have such respect for the teaching profession. And I had just been pouring my whole body and soul into this work and trying to get the algebra project, work with the algebra project on its mission. But I realized that I could not do anything about that because that was her intentional choice. And so my sense of powerlessness in the face of her truth, I think, was the push that I needed to take my dad up on his offer to go to Mississippi. By that time, he was working in Mississippi, and he had been bugging me about coming to Mississippi to check out what he was doing down there. And so I went. And by the time I got to Mississippi, YPP had taken root and was sprouting. And my brothers started YPP. I'm not going to talk a lot about that. That's another story for another day. But I want to talk about some of the young people who were middle school students who helped to start YPP. I always say YPP was started by children, and it really was. It was relationships between these young men, my brothers in their early 20s, but it was really the energy of these middle school students who got YPP off the ground. So here's one of them reflecting on that time. So one important thing about YPP's neighborhood, where YPP got started, is the porches, because that's where families gather. The porches in the front yards and in the backyard, when you come up and down the street where you might think that you're looking at dilapidated properties, what you're looking at is a place that produces greatness, this thing called YPP. The reason I came to YPP, or the reason YPP mattered to me, was because of Medgar Evers. So when I was in elementary school, I was all excited about Martin Luther King, and my grandmother told me that somebody just like Martin Luther King lived in our community. His name was Medgar Evers. So she showed me where he lived, told me his story, told me about him being assassinated. And Bob started working in Brinkley when I was in elementary school. So I remember sitting there, and Bob didn't really matter to me that much. He was like an older guy that was just our math teacher. And then he ended up saying Medgar Evers' name so casually that I asked him, did he know him? He said, yeah. So for me, the algebra project math was always fun. But the thing that attracted me was being around somebody that was around somebody like Medgar Evers. So down on this end of this first hallway in Brinkley Middle School on the first floor, right here, myself, Maisha's younger brother, Taba, and a bunch of kids from Miss Moss's class were in the hallway learning how to do averages. And we were racing cars up and down the hallway, and here comes this other kid who was not in our class. So the kid who was not in our class walked up to me and he said, man, what y'all doing? And I said, well, we learning how to count, how to do averages. We're gonna race the cars up and down, then we're gonna divide the times. And so this kid goes home, shows up to school the next day with his grandmother, and goes to the principal's office and says, I need to be in that class right there. So that was my first time seeing a young person advocate for themselves, and not in a way that you at home telling your mother and father what you don't want to do or whatever, but like to see somebody say something, and then for me to be able to explain it in a way that he felt like he needed it so bad that he went home and got it for himself. And then him coming into this program opened up the doors for a lot of other young people to come into the program. So YPP was never known for recruiting. The way that people come into YPP was you looked around your life and saw who had the need for this thing that was helping you so much. So that was 30 years ago. And a lot has happened in 30 years. Including because of the algebra project and Greg, I actually went back to school and got a master's in math. And Greg was telling some of the math literacy workers last night how I didn't do math undergrad, I did psychology. And so Greg charted a path for me to actually be able to get a master's with only calculus under my belt. But the other thing that I really had under my belt was the algebra project. I mean, it was such a powerful tool in the Young People's Project. And so the other handout that you have with the stories of the math literacy workers is one representation of the culmination of 30 years of this work, of learning how to create spaces for young people to teach other young people math. So I want to talk about a recent program. We piloted a YPP program because we're trying to figure out how to grow it, how to spread it, how to get it to take root in more places. So we piloted a program in a school in the Southeast with 8th graders teaching 6th graders our signature game, this game we have called Flagway. So here's an interview with an 8th grader, hot off the press, right before Christmas, who had his first YPP experience this fall teaching Flagway to his 6th grade peers after school, the math literacy worker. When young people teach young people, it makes a chemical reaction. And the chemical reaction is it's like when their brains combine, because like they think like each other. So it's like 4 + 4 = 8, right? And then if you do 4 + -4, it's 0, right? That's right, that's how you do it. Researcher. So who would be the -4 in that situation? The math literacy worker. Well, the teenager and teenagers is 4 plus 4. And teenagers and like adults, that's -4. Researcher, why are the adults -4? Math literacy worker, because like adults, they've been through a lot of stuff, in life. They be thinking, and they just think too much. Unlike teenagers, we just be trying to think about right now. But adults, they think about your future, right? So then here's a conversation between the teachers who were supporting these 8th grade students and 6th grade students to do this project. Teacher 1, I really love the fact that the students were able to get up and move, because in classes we're so restricted, time restraints, framework restraints, so on and so forth, where we don't have the opportunity to use manipulatives. We don't have opportunity to move around kinesthetically. So just seeing the students having that freedom to do so and then attaching math with it and just seeing them grow throughout the entire process, because we have some students who are extremely timid in class. But seeing that other side of them at the program and just taking the initiative and being leaders and just facilitating different content areas, that was just great to see. Teacher 2. So a lot of times we just tell them the formula because we don't have the time to let them explore and figure out the formula. So to let them really be able to understand and dig into math and really get into their own understanding and reasoning was amazing to see. Teacher 1, on the flip side, my teacher side was just like, sit down, stop yelling. Why are you doing it that way? And that was the hardest part for me, to really take off my teacher hat and let them explore and figure it out without jumping in and trying to fix everything. Teacher 2, I agree, because the first session, I jumped in and I was like, hold up. I have to take a step back and just allow them to explore and take the initiative and to facilitate. That was the hardest thing ever. And then seeing them struggle and not being able to rescue them, that was the hardest. Sometimes I just have to disappear because I couldn't take it. But nevertheless, it went well. Teacher 1, but letting them ask their own questions and figure it out was hard. They figured it out eventually. It was the eventually part that got to me. Like, we could have been here 10 minutes ago if I had just asked you these 3 questions exactly. Teacher 2, everything is time. We're so time-driven to where it's like, hey, we got to get to the next thing. Like, why are we still on this thing? So that's like the worst part of it, yeah. And this is what I'm leaning towards. This is Teacher 1. In this program, we pulled back as the authoritative figure and the facilitator. We gave them the freedom to explore. Maybe it was the fact that they felt safe first. They didn't have us saying, no, 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 you're doing this wrong. And they had the opportunity to explore themselves, catch their mistakes, their own mistakes, correct themselves, and move forward. Teacher 2, yeah, they said it when we did a debrief. They said it when we were asking, what does it mean in math to get something wrong? And the students were saying, oh, you're wrong, you're stupid. But like, it's not wrong in the YPP project. So that's it, they do feel safer because they get the ability to explore. And when you're exploring, there's no right or wrong way to explore. Teacher 2, with me being their math teacher, a lot of them shocked me with their actual ability to teach, their ability to grasp and then reteach it, because that's the only way you really know you know something, is if you can reteach it. But it's like in class, you're saying nothing, the students are saying nothing, you're lost. So how do we get here to where you're teaching somebody, but just 7th period, you were looking at me like a deer caught in the headlights? Like how? That was my biggest thing. I'm like, oh, they can get it. We just don't give them the time. Teacher 1, Seeing them being facilitators in the program, well, we could possibly bring that back in the classroom and have them teach certain concepts because they learn differently hearing it from each other. So just knowing that they have the ability to teach, and they may just learn it quicker and faster if it comes from their peer as opposed to the adult in the room. I generally feel like children can teach each other better than adults can teach children because they know how to explain it to one another. It was just great to see the students flourish. The highlights of my life is when that light bulb goes off and they really get it. Like, I taught you and you really got it. So to see that was amazing. That was an amazing gift the program gave me. Teacher one, and you know, it touched my heart. There's moments where I felt I was gonna cry. I was like, hold on. I'm not even trying to be dramatic, but just taking a step back and sitting in a corner and watching the students take the lead, I was like, wow, this is crazy. Crazy to see and witness. So, we're working on a problem. My dad coined our problem sharecropper education. You get the education you need for the work you've been pre-assigned. And because of sharecropper education, I think the country on average graduates 12th graders with 8th grade skills. And the case that the Campaign for Fiscal Equity pursued in New York City showed this in it, you know, when they tried to sue the state of New York. They showed just that. But in today's 21st century knowledge-based economy, this is a problem that breeds all kinds of problems. I was really privileged, as I said, to have spent a lot of time listening to my dad talk to the country about itself, and leaning on his lessons in SNCC's voter registration work. He talked to us about how to think about ourselves as constitutional people and how to think about our work, the problem we are working on as existing in a constitutional space, meaning to think about what the Constitution requires, forbids, or permits. And of course, the Constitution says nothing explicit about education. For the purpose of our education, we are citizens of states, not the country. And my dad brought this fact into sharp focus when at the 2006 winter commencement address at the University of Michigan, he gave a one-sentence speech telling us that we needed to have a conversation about amending the Constitution to address that fact. So when I think about the teachers' conversation and the math literacy workers' work and YPP's work, lately I've been thinking about it in that sense. In what constitutional space does their conversation exist? Does their work exist? What's required of them? What's permitted? What's forbidden? What recourse do children and teachers who find themselves in schools that essentially provide sharecropper education have for themselves? How do they act? Neither as victim nor as executioner. And in what space does the idea live that maybe children should have a right to help each other learn? That they should develop a sense of shared responsibility to do so, and that schools are organized by design. The curriculum, the time, the space, and the talent of everyone in the school is organized by design for that to happen as a matter of course. And I will stop there.
So we have about 15 minutes to have a conversation together and with you, Maisha. Thank you for your presentation. So in the Algebra Project and YPP, we're pretty good at wait time. So if you wanna gather your thoughts, now are we gonna have a portable microphone or something where I can walk around? It's over there? It's right there. Okay, so there's a mic. Thank you. There's a mic in each. Sorry, with the lights, in my face, I can't really see, but thank you for pointing that out. So there's a mic in each of these 2 rows. If you just come up, and if you could please tell us your name and anything else you want to share about yourself, about why you're here, and then your question.
My name is Jerome Dances, and I've been a member of the society since 1963. And I was trained in topology by R.H. Bing, which used the discovery method, in which the professor gave a lecture on the first day, and after that, he provided us with a list of problems, which got us to explore the mathematics, and then we would present it. Later on, I found out about group learning in school, and so I had my students divide themselves up into teams of 4. Each would get a panel of the blackboard, and they would work on problems which I gave them, which led them to explore the subject. And what was not uncommon was the next day I might come in and say, okay, the theorem for today is, and I write it on the board, and then I'd say, and for the proof, take the problem that you did yesterday and replace every 5 by an A and every 7 by a B, and that's the proof of the theorem. So that was in response to your question about how to get the students to explore. Okay, separate from that, I was briefly a sworn official of the state of California, charged with evaluating middle school math textbooks for children who were at least a year behind. And what jumped out at me was that the writers of the textbooks had no sense on how to write mathematics so that it was correct, coherent, understandable. I actually had a list of 10 adjectives that they missed, as well as they could not tell the difference between a correct mathematical argument and an incorrect one. And I ended up writing a report, which I wanted to call Myths in the Middle School Math Textbooks, because I found things like, let's see, the Grand Canyon is minus 200 feet below sea level, and this extra minus sign was in all the textbooks. These were different publishers. And so it's really, crucial, or that not only the textbook writers but also the teachers have know this. But unfortunately, the certification tests for teachers are so low that they do not have to know the subject in order to be certified. And that needs to change. And that's in addition to everything you're doing. And I guess I've broken the ice because,
Thank you, Jerome.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your talk. My name is Marta Alcala, and I'm coming from Asheville, North Carolina. And one of the things that stuck out from your story, many things, but one was when your grant ran out and how we didn't continue to make that a priority, right? Because something that is working, and I don't know the demographics of the students that you were working with. I heard about the alcohol in the baby bottles, and I don't want to make assumptions, but where I live, the achievement gap is Black, and it's a very small district, right? And so we do try things that are very different, that work, and that really connect Black students or Latino students, and then that's what can be funded. And then that's what, we don't know, that's a little strange, whatever. So I'm wondering, once you broke out from having to depend on a grant and you went with your dad, was there an endowment or something that allowed you to continue working for students? Normally people say underserved and blah, 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 and I like to say overly harmed, because the curriculums and stuff are made very specific for whom it's showing that we're growing. And so I just want to thank you for your energy, your effort, for your talk, and just for doing the thing.
Thank you. No, we do not have an endowment. I wouldn't mind an endowment.
Me too.
I would like to spend more time doing math with kids than trying to raise money.
Hi, I'm Felicia. I studied math at Duke, and where I was on the DI committee, and I'm also a community organizer, primarily in the climate justice space, and also wrote a paper about Bob Moses and all the work he did, and SNCC, and so very, very cool that I got to hear this talk. I'm very inspired by all of the work and think it's such a cool intersection of my interests. But I had a couple questions. My first being that how do you, sustain this type of I don't know how to say it, but I guess exposure or intervention, because I feel like I've been very lucky to have been exposed to a type of inquiry-based learning or trying to discover math in high school and middle school. But when I got to college, for example, it was back to the lecture format. And even though I had experienced that love and joy of discovering math without fearing being wrong before, it was hard to maintain it when that wasn't the environment anymore in college, where it was very getting information thrown at me and trying to memorize things. And then I got inquiry-based learning again and was oh, I love math again, and then I don't like math again. And so sort of connected to this question is, one, how do you sustain it? And two, what is the right age of intervention? Is there an age where it's too early or too late? Or if you can only intervene once in a child's life with this kind of mathematics education, what is the right time to do that? Why is it algebra? And how do you continue it throughout calculus and all of that?
I don't know that I have a good answer to the first question. Somebody else in the audience might. I don't really work on higher education, but I do understand what you're talking about. As I think about the problem in the work in two ways. The traditional way works for a relatively small percentage of people, just all people. And the majority of people need experience and stories to help make math meaningful. And so figuring out how to do that and keeping the rigor, to your comment, is a really, I think, beautiful and interesting and exciting problem, and history has brought us to this place. And then the other part of the problem in the country is the legacy of slavery and the ongoing inequities in the country. And so those two things sort of come together in our work. In terms of early younger children, or when is the right time? I think, I don't know, from birth, in the womb. We have a game, so my dad created this game called Flagway, and he gifted it to YPP, and we've been working this game for many years. And the thing that's interesting about the game, it's based on the Mobius function, so it, it carries up into, advanced mathematics. But you have to learn, you have to know your prime numbers to play the game, right? To understand the Mobius function. And you have to develop fluency. And so what we have run into in trying to play the Flagway game is that multiplicative fluency is just very, very weak. And you get, even students in high school, and they're still working on multiplication. They haven't gotten it. And so what it made me think is that, well, children do have mathematical talk with their parents as they're growing up, but most of it is about addition. Most of the things adults get their children to pay attention to from, yay high is counting and adding things. But talking about multiplicative relationships early on just doesn't happen. And so then children's introduction to multiplication is really more formal in school, right? They don't have the same intuitive experiential foundation that they have with addition. And that's really when, I think of it as the math cliffs, where people start falling off of mathematics. Fractions, but underlying fractions is multiplicative reasoning and conceptual understanding.
And I'd like to just jump in, if I could, to, I was thinking of, does anybody remember Tracy Chapman, the singer? Yeah. She has this great song, If Not Now, Then When? Right? If not today, why make your promises, and so forth. So one of the things that the Young People's Project and YPP has tried to do, that Bob Moses passed on to us, Greg and other mathematicians have worked with us on, and young people have developed as well, is a whole set of experiential activities, as Maisha was describing, what some folks in the network call grounding metaphors, which can be implemented in elementary level, secondary level, and some people have used them in entry-level college courses as well. And I'll just put a little plug in here because we're doing a special session this afternoon from 1 to 5 in room 207A. This is a special session on K-12 mathematics literacy for 21st century citizenship. So you can come. Deborah Ball, who was here earlier, will be presenting doing a workshop with students. Greg will be doing a workshop with some of the YPP MLWs that are here. Been working on some very interesting stuff, I might add. Tanya Clark, Dr. Clark from Clayton County, Georgia, and Quincy Dawson from Kennesaw State University will all be sharing a set of 4 different interactive workshops, so you can actually see and experience and participate in dialogue about some of these interactive activities that we do at all different levels. So to Maisha's point, all the above. And we have just 2 more minutes. Betsy's still smiling. I don't want her to start frowning, okay? So we're just going to take one more question, if we could, from one more person. I'm sorry we don't have time for more. We're on a hard schedule, right? Is that? Yes. So we'll take one more question. I apologize for those whose questions didn't get answered, but Maisha, can I say that we'll be around in the hall if you'd like to stay and have conversation. We look forward to following up. Please.
Hi, I'm
And
Angeline.
please speak right into the mic.
Yes. Hi, I'm Angeline. I'm a third-year math student at MIT, and I was wondering if in recent years, generative AI has become more and more accessible to the public, especially the models that are able to solve very complex problems. And I was wondering if you noticed the effects of students relying and perhaps over-relying on AI to solve their math problems, and whether or not that, or how much maybe negative effects you see of that in work. I mean, not only does it build a reliance, but it also takes away from the collaborative experience
of working with other people, teaching other people mathematics, when it's easier to say, go ask ChatGPT instead of asking me. So I was wondering if I could hear your thoughts on that matter.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to turn your question back to the audience, if anybody else has thoughts on it. I'm not close enough to it. YPP is like very experiential, kinesthetic-based, game-based, but we work with students, and they are in school, so I don't know if any one of them has a thought about your question, or you do, yeah.
There's no, can you hear me? Am I talking into the mic?
Yep, right into the mic.
Okay. I think that ChatGPT is likely to be the thing students turn to when the whole focus of the course is the answer. Mm-hmm. And your YPP approach is not the answer, but are there 27 different ways to get to a solution and to a methodology? Mm-hmm. And so when the focus is on the how, not the answer, then I think ChatGPT or any of those are not going to be the answer to how you do it.
Thank you. I would add from the Algebra Project's perspective, our question, clearly there are bad uses of AI, like there were bad uses of graphing calculators, and there were debates about should the kids get graphing calculators. But there can be constructive uses, so that what we need to work on, what are the constructive uses where the students still are carrying the cognitive load, right, not the AI. So that's a key question that we're trying to explore, developing. We have a proposal that's pending, so I can't talk about it, but that's what interests us. How can we constructively use new technologies in a way that keeps the students' development, learning, relational collaboration front and center? Thank you, Maisha.
That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Betsy. Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Yeah, thanks for
Wonderful
coming.
session.